Life, like everything, is a series of nested circles or cycles. And there's a pattern. There's a breathing out and a breathing in, but it's a spiral pattern. The pattern you breathe in as an infant and then breathe out as an adolescent is not the same pattern you breathe in as an adult and then breathe out as a spiritual adult. So let's look at a couple of the stops, a couple of the point in this cycle, in this breath. So the first pattern is one of adaptation and coping. So it's an unconscious inhale of everything around us, the culture, the family system, intergenerational abuse, coping mechanisms, addiction, whatever's out there, it's breathed in. And in the assimilation, the unconscious acceptance of the outer imprint, we earn a sense of belonging. And from an evolutionary point of view, we're inheriting the best imperfect practices. So they're the best that the cult or culture has to offer, the status quo, but they're profoundly flawed. They're better than nothing, and they've kept the majority of people alive until this point. Now that unconscious and, unconditional inhale is followed by a more critical exhale, which is the adolescent, the rebellion, the acknowledgement of the hypocrisy, of the unfairness, of the injustice, of the absurdity of what is, of reality. And so there's a rejection of family, of cult, of the world. Now, this is followed by an inhale of a more conscious type. And it's a necessary inhale. Life is a process of inhaling and exhaling. And the goal is that the caliber of the breath increases at each point. So you can only reject the monetary system, the abusive hierarchical, the patriarchal dominant system, the government, authoritarian, teachers, school, job, corruption. You can only reject so far, meaning you can only exhale so far before you either die or you inhale again, right? Try living without money, without chemicals, without parents, without teachers, without government, right? It's hard without, we're not going to drive in a car because it's polluting the atmosphere. We're not going to, eat food because it kills plants. Try living in an exhale of rejection for too long and you die. So the inhale is hopefully informed by that criticism. So now you pick best practices. So before you inhaled whatever was given to you, now having criticized all of that, if you've done your job as an adolescent, you inhale better practices, right? I'm going to get a job, not for ExxonMobil or whatever it is that I've rejected, but I will get a job, right? But I'll pick perhaps a more ethical job that's not as bad. I will drive a car, but it'll be a Volkswagen with 35 miles to the gallon rather than, or it'll be a Tesla, right? The new version would be a Tesla. It won't be a gas guzzling, Chevrolet pickup or something. It'll be thoughtful, right? So you inhale the world again, but in a more conscious form. And in the process, right? In the process, you have success, right? So you inhale the world again in the most conscious form that you can find. You read the books that you think are good books. You participate in whatever it is that you think is, the thing to participate in. And you succeed, right, to some extent, right? If you inhale consciously and with a little bit more discipline, you will eventually succeed, right? Now, this success leads to a helplessness or a hopelessness. Why, right? Because even the new form of reality, you went to the right gurus, you went to therapy, you picked the right partner, you made the money, you paid off the debt, right? Even if you're competent and the new form of reality that you've inhaled works, it produces the outer effect. You get a house, you get sex, you get money, whatever it is that you think is important. You get tenure at your college. You realize this horrifying thing, and it's at the moment when it works, right? Because when the world doesn't work, when you're broke, when you're unemployed, when you're can't achieve your goals, when you don't have a car, when nobody likes you, right? Then you can believe the illusion, the false God, right? You can believe that when I have the money, when my debt is paid off, when I have a house, when I have a wife, when I have a car, when people like me, when I'm famous, then drum roll, right? I will be happy. My pain, my angst, my trauma will be lifted, right? And this is a wonderful and necessary hope as you inhale the world and climb the ladder of competence and success, right? Except, drum roll, at the end of that, when you have the money, when you are debt-free, right? This was my big crisis, right? Debt-free, retirement fund, a house, a great job, lots of sex, travel. It didn't take away the pain, right? It didn't resolve the undiagnosed trauma. It didn't create a deep sense of peace and well-being. It didn't fulfill me energetically. I didn't feel filled with energy. I felt exhausted. I felt tired, right? So the inhale of the second wave of competence, the second wave of success, our version, still doesn't cut it, right? Now, some of us don't get to that point where we realize the second dream is also a lie, right? The first dream, go to school, mind your P's and Q's, do what God says, don't do that. That's a bunch of bullshit, and any adolescent worth their salt can see that, right? Mom's a hypocrite, dad's out having an affair, the minister's doing this bullshit, the teachers don't know what. Such a pile of crap, right? So that's easy, right? Any adolescent can reject the status quo. Right? Finding something that's better, right? Working to create a better business or something, that's obviously a lot harder. But the idea is now it's going to be done my way, right? Now I'm going to, find a more ethical way of doing this. I'm going to hang out with my friends, right? The people that I like to spend time with, and I'm going to, wear the clothes I want to wear and do all these things, right? And then that's going to work, right? That's the hope of the adolescent moving into grown-uphood, right? And climbing whatever it is the narrative. Now, some people never go through a healthy adolescent, right? They're given all the shit as a child. They're punished and traumatized for questioning any authority, so they just live in fear and shame and try and do what they're told, and they're told to go to college and stuff. But, whether it's reaching the childhood pinnacle of being the good little boy and the good little girl, or whether it's rejecting all that and actually going through a full adolescent cycle, which is antithesis. You have sympathy, antithesis, and then aiming for the adolescence version of things. When I grow up and when the world is done my way, it's going to be, well, either way, whether it's the cult's version of success or whether it's the adolescent's version of success, it doesn't matter. You get to the top rung of the ladder and you say, I've arrived. And it doesn't feel any better. In fact, now we have a letting go, we have a descent into despair. Why? Because the adolescent's version of success and wonderment isn't perfect either, right? It may be less flawed than the status quo, right? The status quo might be 80% flawed, but the adolescent's version of what it's going to be to stay up all, do whatever I want, do this, work these things, be famous, whatever it is, the adolescent's version of that is still 50% flawed. There's a gaping hole. There's all kinds of parts inside that are not satisfied. There's also the crisis of what to do next, right? I couldn't rationally look out and see, well, get another car. That's going to do it, right? The first car didn't do it. Clean and pay for and maintain a second car. How's that going to do it, right? So it dawns on the 30, 40, 50-year-old when, some people are afraid of this crisis, and so they just don't succeed, right? But at some point, if you don't run from this realization, if you're moderately competent, you reach the expression that you've choreographed as arriving. And it doesn't do it. And it feels worse than it did before. Because when you're poor and you believe that being rich is going to do it, you can look forward to being rich under the illusion of your projection, right? It's going to do it. It's going to do it, right? And the cult is out there, and all the advertisers are saying, when you buy this product and you do this and you make this money, it's going to do it. It's like, oh, good. Finally, I'm going to be able to relax. I'm going to be able to feel good about myself. I'm going to be able to heal this pain, this loneliness. It's going to just, it'll all be wonderful. I just need to make $1 million, get $100,000 in the bank, have enough to not need any more, whatever it is, right? I just need to get to that point. But as one arrives at the point, right, two things happen. One, there's nowhere to go, right? You've arrived, so momentum slows down. There's no drive. There's no, got to do this and do this and this because, okay, this is it, right? I have the $100,000 in the bank. The debt is paid off. There's no student loans. I'm working a good job. I have a lover in my bed, a nice car in the driveway, whatever it is, right? I've arrived. So where do I go from here? That's the first crisis. And the second and more profound crisis is it's not doing it. I feel worse. Nobody told me when I arrive here I'm going to feel worse, and nobody explained why. Everyone told me go out and do this and it'll be great. right? So there's the discrepancy, there's the insanity, and then people may even be saying, wow, you've made it. And you know you haven't, because you feel worse than you did before. You realize that the cult doesn't know that it doesn't know what it's doing, right? It's crazy, but it doesn't know that it's crazy. And enough people are still failing that they believe that when they reach success, it's going to feel sustainably great. And it doesn't. So these are the three crises. I'm all alone. Nobody seems to understand that this isn't what it's cracked up to be. Right? I don't know where to go from here because I've, quote, arrived. And it feels worse than when I was working towards something, right? And I don't know what to do, right? So this is a crisis, and it leads to despair. It leads to hopelessness. It leads to a collapse and a depression. I'm not going to work 50-hour weeks so that I can maintain this misery. No, I'm not interested in this. So there's a letting go without knowing what's coming. And we can avoid this, right? So that's the out-breath, is the despair of collapsed dreams and collapsed hopes. It's not going to cut it. It isn't cutting it. And I've got to try something else, and I don't know what it is, and I don't want to face the unknown, but that's what's there, right? I don't want to breathe in, X out into that place. I don't want to feel powerless. I don't want to feel helpless. I don't want to feel hopeless, but I feel those things. And so here's where we can go into addiction. We can go back into adolescence, right? It's often called the midlife crisis, and so you try and relive adolescent dreams and recreate them, and try and drive a fast car, or have an affair, or get hooked on cocaine, or go out and buy things, or start gambling, right? Because I don't want to admit what my body, what my heart and my mind are telling me, which is I haven't arrived. I feel worse, and I don't know what the fuck to do about it, and everyone else thinks I've arrived. What do you do then, right? There isn't a manual. Nobody told me, and so that's why I'm telling you. So avoidance is trying to patch up and deny this crisis. It's a form of grief. Right? Because that was the goal, and now it's dead. But I don't want to admit it's dead, because then I have to find another goal, and I haven't been equipped, right? My cult has been lying to me the whole time, so I've got nowhere to turn, right? So the collapse is busily avoided. So, for example, I went on a hedonic thrust. I'm not interested in cocaine, so I traveled the world rapidly. I bought toys. I had more sex. I got more impatient. I looked for more stimuli. I demanded, people cater to my needs, right? Because, I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do about not knowing what to do. And I didn't understand this cycle. And I just felt like if I could infuse my body with enough sensation, the perfect meal, going to this restaurant, flying to this hotel, the perfect lover, my radio-controlled toys, my perfect this, my perfect day. If I could just move from this to this to this perfect sensation, I wouldn't have to feel the grief, the despair that my best version of a successful life was going up in smoke because it didn't address PTSD. It didn't address childhood trauma. It didn't address terror in my body. It didn't address 8 layers of loneliness that were buried and buried and buried. And then the truth of that burial was buried again by another 8 layers, right? And nobody would talk about any of them, right? None of that's going to get addressed by having a bigger house or a nicer car or a more beautiful lover, right? So the recipe is flawed, but we don't know where to go to respond to that realization other than to try and repeat. So there's an avoidance cycle, and the avoidance gets louder, and the evidence that it's not working gets louder. So there's a weighing process that goes on. The avoidance gets more frenetic, right? I have to jump from here and to here and do this. I have to get more and more tunnel vision to not face the grief, to not face the unknown, to not face the terror, the panic, the anger. Why is everyone lying to me? Is everyone so stupid that they really can't see the state that I'm in? And all they can look at is the form and call it success because they haven't succeeded enough to realize that it's a mirage, to realize that it's a lie, right? You know, and so in this state, people would come up to me and say, wow, what a great life, right? And so all that told me is I'm surrounded by morons, by blind people like me who still think, because they haven't reached it yet, that this is going to do it. And they're so blind and so committed to their idea of what success is that they can't see me. They're not asking, how does it feel to be you? They're telling me how I should feel. They don't want to know how I feel. They're telling me how they're going to feel in their fantasy when they have what I have. Nobody's asking. Nobody's understanding. Nobody wants to break the egg, the illusion, right? They want to hold out that I'm living the great life and that maybe one day they will too. But in fact, I'm living the life of an addict, trying to avoid the pain that what I thought was the great life is so off base that I don't even know what to do. And I'm exhausted from all the effort to, quote, live the great life, and the thought of all the work that's going to be required to take the next step. And it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific to think of the amount of energy that is being first consumed to create all this, and then being consumed to avoid dealing with these truths, and then to provide energy and reassurance for the people that want to still believe that that's going to do it. It's exhausting. And then there's no one to feel that grief with. And that's lonely. And it's lonely to be lonely when nobody wants to acknowledge it. And so it's exhausting to have to bury the loneliness so that other people's delusions that everything is great can be accommodated so that they can go on projecting. This is exhausting. And the exhaustion and the struggle between the avoidance and addiction and compulsion to avoid this grief and this pain, and the louder and louder awareness that it's not doing it leads to collapse, right? At some point, it's a crisis. It's a collapse, right? The ground gives out from under, and another, bar of sugar, another sexual encounter, another bit of money isn't going to do it. It's not going to do it. And I'm all alone here in a cult that doesn't want to go into this pain, that doesn't want to acknowledge that there's an issue that the cult doesn't have the competency to respond to. So this is the exhale of despair, the exhale of, I give up, right? So I'm laying on the floor. I don't want to get up. I don't want to move. I'm trying to figure out what to do. What do I do as I fall apart? Right, so this is the exhaling of the adolescent or the young adult's version of success that didn't do it into the unknown, into the crisis of the unknown. And it can be very self-destructive. It can lead to death, right? So that's one option, is to just keep breathing out into deeper and deeper despair and grief and burying and avoidance and die. So that's one path. And the other is rebuilding, right? But it has to be a rebuilding that is now in response to something a little bit more solid. What about all those painful memories of abuse? What's the response to that? What about these tensions in my body that have never let go for 40 years and nobody seems to notice? What about that? What do I do about the fact that I don't feel like breathing? What's that about? What do I do that nobody wants to deal with this? That the more I talk about this, the more everyone in their own addiction to avoid these feelings rushes frenetically away and becomes more and more crazy, leaving me more and more alone with the message, put on the mask, or go away and stop talking. What do you do with all those assholes, right? You need help. You're confused. You're tired. You're in pain. And every fucking person, off they go, right? Oh, you're going to be real? I don't want any part of that. Get the fuck out of my life, right? Well, maybe you'll be a little bit angry. Maybe you'll be a bit disgusted. What kind of a pathetic cult is this, right? When you actually need help, that's when you run off, you dumb fucks, right? Maybe you're a little pissed. And the cult doesn't want to deal with your rage, doesn't want to deal with your bitterness, right? Doesn't want to deal with your on-point criticism, right? So now there's isolation, trauma, pain. There's still the unknown. There's still helplessness and despair and hopelessness. But there's a deeper underbelly, right? It's a deeper level of cultural criticism than the first round of criticism. These motherfuckers, right, are so dumb, right? They don't even get that they're dumb. right? They do the worst possible thing and think that they're being helpful. And they're so dumb they don't even know that they're not being helpful. And apparently they can't ask, right? I mean, this is a disgusting review of the inadequacies of a cult in which everyone follows the protocol. Let's all run when this feeling comes up. Let's all avoid this. It's a nice crowd mentality, but it's completely and utterly backwards. Right? So this can lead into cynical depression, hopelessness, bitterness, and death. Just rage at other people or destruction. Or it leads away from the cult and inward. Right? Why? Because the cult has let you down. The cult has let your family down. Your cult has let your friends down. The one that committed suicide. The one with the drinking problem. The one that's sexually abusing their daughter. The cult has let you down, and it's letting the people you care about down as well. And when you reach out for help, that's when the cult scuttles away like a coward. Well, that's betrayal. That's failure. That's dis-ease. That's death. That's stupidity. So this is very difficult to deal with. Your cult is a goddamned fucking moron. And it's too fucking cowardly to admit that it's a goddamned fucking moron. That it's a coward. That it's so dumb it doesn't even grasp the full extent of its stupidity. Like, this is really the time to discover that, when you actually could use some help, right? When my therapist, Peter Sandhill, sexually abused me under the influence of psychedelics, escalating my first homosexual relationship while being in dissociative states, pushing me to do this, and then runs away, and I can't deal with that with attachment disorder. With a narcissistic lover that's so busy with her own stuff, never occurs to her to be there for a partner in this state. When everyone in the community runs away because they don't want to deal with the hurt and the pain and the rage. Let's just bury this, right? Right when you actually could use a little help, that's when your cult betrays you. That's when your family dishes out their judgments, right? If the cult was halfway competent in these moments, we would never look inward, right? Because the cult has been bludgeoning us since the day we were born. Listen to us, do what we say, or we'll punish you, right? But when the cult is this inept, this stupid, and causes this much pain, well, it loses credibility in a big way. And so there's an exhaling of the attachment, right? I'm an American, I'm a man, I'm a this, I'm a business, right? Fuck all that. It's failed. It isn't giving me energy. It's not seeing me. It didn't give me a competent map. It took me right into a fucking brick wall and then ran away because it was too shamed. Because it was too ashamed to own culpability. And so it never called an ambulance. It just left me there to die, right? Well, that's a pretty good spurt. That's a pretty good impetus to either agree with it and commit suicide, and some do, or to say, fuck the cult, right? Enough of your bullshit, right? You've been spouting off as if you knew what you were doing since the moment I was born. And now when I could really use some help, you dumb fucks, you reveal the profundity of your incompetence. So much for the cult, right? So that's the exhale. That's the going into, I am surrounded by morons, and I'm one of them. I cannot trust my cult brainwashed mind to get me out of the hell that my cult brainwashed mind has colluded to get me into with the cult brainwashed minds of the people around me, right? So I can't trust my own mind, and I can't trust the mind of the cult, because that's what got me in here. So where am I going to go from here, right? This is a crisis. It's big. And there's no solution coming from the cult around that. I've never heard anyone say this, right? Which tells me I've been surrounded by cowards and morons my entire life. I've been a coward and a moron my entire life. I clearly do not have the competence to sort this out. And neither do the people around me, because they haven't and they aren't. Right? You'd think if you were heading into this degree of pain and trauma, somebody would have mentioned it and helped you steer another way, but that would require a certain amount of competence, a certain amount of love, a certain amount of courage, a certain amount of awareness. Right? Well, clearly, whatever degree of love and competency was there didn't penetrate, wasn't competent enough, or the disaster would not have occurred, right? So this is the mind fuck, right? This is the crisis. I don't know what I'm doing, and nobody does either, and I'm in massive amounts of pain that obviously I don't know how to respond to, or I wouldn't have created the pain in the first place. Now, this exhale, this letting go of the cult, and it takes a betrayal this deep, or we would hang on to the known, right? The greatest addiction is certainty, avoiding the fear of death, which means the fear of being out of control. So it takes a cut that's this harsh, that's this hard to wake us up from our attachment to the known, to the cult. Maybe I'll look into that inner place of truth that I abandoned at age 1 in order to fit in. Because maybe the answers are in there, right? And so this is when we begin the third in-breath, which is the reclaiming of self, of spirituality, of our deepest truth in our bodies. And we transcend and reject the cult dogmas that have been used to suppress who we are and have always been beneath the brainwashing. And this is when we find the bones. This is when we find the tattered remains of the bludgeoned, dishonored parts within the psyche that we rolled up in a carpet bag and put underground and walked away from, colluding with the cult so that we could fit in, so that we could belong. And they're not doing that well, rolled up in those sacks, buried 8 feet deep. They're not happy. They haven't been evolving spiritually since the moment we put them there. And they have no illusions that a cult is their friend. They have no illusions that their friendly government is going to rescue them from that sack. It was their friendly government that put them in there and ran a compacting machine to make sure they couldn't get out, right? So what do you do when you grasp the enormity of the conspiracy to cut and deny the self? Right? Take the self and chop it up to 14 pieces and scatter it in all 5 directions to make sure they can't come together again, they can't be whole. What do you do when you discover that you need the water of life to regrow the pieces that have been chopped into bits? And it's been a long time since you heard the music, since you tasted that water. As you get near it, you feel sorrow. You feel grief for all the time that you've lost, for all the lies that you've told, for all the bodies that you've buried inside and out, all the lies that you've told to make sure the graves were never discovered. What do you do when the murderer is you, at the behest of your parents and government? What do you breathe in after breathing that out of your body, after getting that out of your system? Right. What's there? What remains on the other side of that breath? And that's where the great work, the reconnection with self, the reconnection with God, Goddess, all that is, the personal relationship with the divine, with the sacred that we are a part of, a small interconnected part of divinity. It's on the other side of that graveyard. Because when we reject the cult and culture, we reject the wound. That is the cult and culture. And without the wound, the lines that were used to cut us into pieces dissolve, are less prominent. And the wholeness, the synergy, the beauty, truth, and goodness of reality comes forward. And it's a balm, it's healing, it's energizing. Where the cult was deadening, this is healing, this is energizing. So we move into wisdom. The one that knows that all this cult drama is just that, it's a dream. It's a role in which we play this role and play that role, but it's not totally real. It's real enough to be taken seriously, but the play will be over, right? There's a wisdom that comes from connecting with the transcendent self, the one that is outside of the script and watching, the witness. the nameless one. So there's wisdom. There's also transcendence. Now, there can also be an apology, right? I'm an old fuddy-duddy. I'm not important. I apologize for existing, right? This is someone who avoids these feelings and lives lives of quiet desperation, who doesn't go into the depths, who just looks away and hides as much as they possibly can, and understands that their inner world is not welcome in the eyes of the young cult masters. Right? People who haven't gotten the message that they're climbing the wrong ladder, that know better, that are superior, right? They don't want to hear from the elderly. They're too dumb to realize they're dumb, right? Because they're going to get up there and it's all going to be great. The elderly that understand that their truths are unwelcome, that haven't claimed their self and faced that pain, apologize and diminish for taking up space. Apologize for taking up space and move off on the corner, rather than doing their job of initiating their young men and women into adults through the art of confronting and facing death and discovering at a younger age who we really are, right? Without having to hit this wall so harshly. So this is the cycle of in-breath and out-breath, and having breathed in the sacred, having breathed in the transcendent self, the witness, we become luminous. In old age, we become wise in old age, before the final exhale, which is the letting go of the body. So that we can take the last inhale that we can conceptualize, which is reconnecting with the divine geometry, with the energy pattern, with the consciousness that is at the source of all things, without the mask of the role, without the illusion of the body, of language, and the lens of our ideas, to feel what it's like to come home, to return to the one that we never left, but couldn't feel in the layers and layers of dogma and lies. And another breath, until perhaps another lifetime. We have cycles of breath within the lifetime. We have some breaths that take 10 years. We have some breaths that take 10 seconds. We have some breaths that take 100 years, right? Move into the body, 100 years, move out of the body, 100 years, move into the body, 100 years. As an impatient culture, we don't know about 1,000-year breaths and cycles, but they occur. So these are the stages of life. And each one in our cult, in our culture, is necessary. We can die at any point, abort. We can get lost at any point, go numb, become indefinitely compulsive in order to avoid the next stage of the process. Blessings on your journey.